Hello, and welcome to the inaugural podcast of Entertaining the Idea. We are two guys with opinions on the entertainment and creative process, and we're decided to hash it out on a podcast. My name is John, and this is my friend...
Oh, hey.
Tony.
This is our first introduction. It's okay if it's rough.
We'll get this thing down, so there may be a few back and forths like that. So welcome, Tony. I was excited to do this. Always talking about something, and we both kind of go back and forth about whatever topic we like with talking movies or TV or whatever it may be. So we thought, why not just start hashing it out on a podcast?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is definitely your brainchild, and when you were telling me about it, I'm like, yeah, we should. I think the first time you brought this up, we were actually on the golf course, and you're like, that whole discussion should have been a podcast. I was excited. There's a lot of things that I actually do want to talk to you about to catch your opinions on.
Excellent. All right, so then let's dive into it and do our very first segment ever. And so I wanted to know, what were you watching this week? Be it movies, TV, what music you're listening to, any good podcasts, maybe you saw a live show. So what do you got this week?
Yeah, this week the Olympics are on, so I've definitely been watching Olympics. Big one that I'm doing. So I love the skeleton and the luge together. My wife is into the doubles figure skating, so we've been watching that, and we were watching the two Germans that just won, and it was kind of amazing because the dude is so much bigger than the girl, so he's just like hefting her across the ice, and it makes me wonder that maybe there's going to be like a shift in figure skating. I think you're going to get a lot bigger figure skaters that are able to like really move these women around. I'm expecting maybe The Rock will be a figure skater before too long.
I think they could use the figure skating, because I'm not that into it. And I was just talking with my wife about the same thing. I was just like, these men, they don't got like any gusto to them. It's a very like sort of feminine sport, or because what they do is amazing. Like physically is like very impressive, but then it kind of doesn't have the draw for me. And I think a wider range of guys, which I think would be a lot more fun. Even just more like current stuff, some pop music things. And The Rock is a great guy. If The Rock was doing it, I'd be all aboard on figure.
You're going to get a lot of more buff like ice skaters, and I hope they do. So other than that, I've been watching Black Mirror because everybody told me to watch that, so I'm catching up on that one. And then the one sitcom that I've been watching a ton is The Mick on Fox, and that is just hysterical. Well,
is it funny?
Oh, it's great. There's a guy on there by the name of Scott MacArthur, who he was a writer for them, and now he's like plays Jimmy, her like fiance, and he is just so good. It's so dark. Every episode has something that just goes in the completely wrong direction. It's as dark as Always Sunny, and possibly a little darker when you get into some of the stuff. So I highly love it, and it makes me laugh. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of that's I've seen, and I'm like, that could be good, especially, but you're never sure it was like a mid-season replacement, and it did have that offbeat humor, and usually with a pilot you are hitting a little low-hanging fruit, but usually sometimes those shows, though, it's like second, third, fourth episode in is when they really start hitting your stride, and that's when you realize what kind of show it is. So I'm glad to hear that, because then it actually makes me want to check it out, because I just wasn't sure, and I actually haven't heard anybody yet talk about it. So
it's so dark. It's so dark. It's so funny. I love it. So yeah, that's what I'm watching. What about you?
I like you. The Olympics are kind of changing up my normal viewing schedule for the week, and I've been trying quotes to check them out, because we've put on like NBC on the regular channel on NBC, but then we've also been trying to catch up on some things with using their app on the Apple TV, and their app is just all over the place, and it's been very confusing, and the scheduling of how they do everything is hard to kind of follow. So usually jump in, and it's either figure skating, but then there was supposed to be some skiing on earlier, and I don't know how to watch it, and we're trying to go back and catch it, and we're watching like clips on the app, but like every clip has an ad that's like the equal length of the clip itself, which is always frustrating. Whoa. So yeah, but we did watch the half pipe snowboard event, which was exciting. We caught some of the men's solo figure skating last night, which was interesting, but which got me thinking kind of in the same along the lines what you were talking about with having bigger dudes. And these guys weren't that big, but some of the stuff they're doing were cool. And if they just kind of, I felt like, updated it and weren't so old school and uptight about it, how the ice skating kind of world is, the figure skating world, I think they actually could get a bigger audience, and I would enjoy it more. So that was fun. But my other big problem with it's tough, and this is just, it's not a complaint, it's just that everything is always posted with Twitter and websites and ESPN. Like, you go to anything, and with Korea being 17 hours ahead of us, they post things that already happened. So even if you're just nonchalantly going through a feed or checking out a website, you're bound to see something posted like somebody wins gold, and it's like, well, I'm not going to watch that for another 5 hours, and it's like, it kind of takes away from watching the event itself. And I'm not searching out the answers, they just kind of pop up with you not even thinking about it, which is always a little disappointing. And that's just a modern day thing, and it's hard to get around, and I think NBC still has some work to do of figuring out those type of problems. But hopefully they'll get there. But at least you get to go back and watch clips of things that happen if you didn't able to catch it in the prime time, which is always a nice benefit nowadays with YouTube or their app, that you can just go back and watch something if you weren't able to catch it when it happens or when they aired it. So there's plus and minuses to all this, all the new dynamics of digital watching and the bifurcated way that media is. So
bifurcated. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
We're pulling it out. Occasionally, I'll have a good word in it there. Maybe once an episode, we'll see. So the other thing I've been watching this week, which is part of my normal routine, is the Goldbergs. Which is good, easy, the ABC family comedy. It's been on for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah. It's fun just because it's also based out of suburbs of Philly, so there's always some good Philly references in there, which I get a little more. Some Wawa, some Wooder, those kind of things, which is always fun. But it's just funny. It's also got the nostalgia thing with the 80s, and there was some good references in it. But I do like how they do it, because they just say like 1980 something, because it's narrated, kind of like Wonder Years sort of was.
Yeah.
But they just say 1980 something, so they don't get too caught up in exactly when things were. They're able to then just jump around and make, do an episode based off any craze that was in the 80s. And also checking out The Americans, which we've been binge watching over the past month. I almost caught up totally to that. Have you ever seen that?
No, that's one of the ones that's on the list that everybody keeps telling me that I gotta see. And I love that Carrie Felicity, Carrie Russell. I keep wanting to call her. But Carrie Russell, she's great in everything I've seen her do, even like in the movie Waitress. She's great. I just gotta see.
She's really good in this one too. It was one of those ones that's been on my list for a while as well, and not quite as great as from what I've heard, the hype about it, but it's still really good. She's really good. Other guy, the husband, Matt Rice, Matt Rice, I think his name is. He's really good. So they do their job. Like, I don't like the Carrie Russell character. Like, I don't like her. Watching it, I'm like, I hate you. But that's because she's doing a really good job. So it would be curious how you see that, to do a deeper dive into it. But it's good. And then the other thing I caught up this week was Dunkirk. Saw it in theaters last year when it came out in IMAX. Wasn't too sure how I felt about it, because they do this manipulation with time for multiple storylines, which was confusing. Okay. And it was hard to keep track of, and so I wasn't completely immersed in the story. But the second time around, knowing what I was getting into, I was able to follow it a lot better, stay involved, and it is really good. Especially later on as these storylines converge, it's a lot more exciting by the end.
Yeah, that's one I definitely want to see. It's one of the ones, though, I feel like I got to gear myself up to see. Like, just like war stuff in general, just the horror of war seems so rough to me, that like World War I movies like that are going to be ultra realistic, like I feel like I got to gear myself up for. It's kind of like, it took me a long time to watch 12 Years a Slave. Like, I felt like I really had to gear myself up to watch it, and then when I did, I mean, obviously it was a brilliant movie, but it was just like, I just can't watch people get brutalized like that. And then when, like, it's war is so brutal, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it, but I got to gear myself up.
Yeah, and that almost could be a topic. I know the feeling, because I'm the same way with, like, I haven't watched that Manchester by the Sea movie yet, because I'm just like, I don't need that in my life right now, and I don't feel like getting geared up to, like, feel sad. So I'll just pass on that. But that said, Dunkirk isn't as much like that. Everybody interprets it differently. I didn't get that much of war is hell kind of thing as much from it. It's more of just the survival and just about pure human instinct of that way. So there's less of this atrocities. It's more of just about being in that moment of scared and what people kind of do. So it's not that long either. It's not a normal Nolan film. It's less than 2 hours. I think it's like an hour and 50 minutes. So you're not diving into this long, drawn out thing that you really have to get emotionally ready for as much. At least that's how I felt. Like it was an interesting movie to watch and uplifting in other parts, surreal in different parts. So I don't know. I definitely recommend checking it out, though.
It's funny you brought up Manchester by the Sea. I had thought that was a comedy because I didn't know much about it. So I was sitting around with my in-laws in the basement of their place in Pennsylvania. We're like, oh, what's this Manchester by the Sea? And I was like, I think it's this comedy and it should be nice. And like by the end of it, like everybody was just in tears and like weeping, and it's such a rough movie. And I was just like, that wasn't funny at all. But did they not play that as a comedy when they were doing the advertisements? That it was like this light drama, or was I just completely wrong?
I think you might be completely wrong because I knew that it was like this heavy movie that when I was younger, like in late high school, early college, I would have been like all about like, yeah, I want to watch this heavy drama and like watch like acting and directing and just now I got too much stuff going on in my life that I don't need to be brought down like that. Like I felt the same thing with 12 Years a Slave, but I was like, I'll go watch it, but it was like the same thing. Although 12 Years a Slave in the end was not quite as downer, but
it wasn't. That was the other. I mean, it wasn't. It was really good. It was really uplifting. I mean, I loved it. I loved a lot of the stuff, but I got to gear myself up to see it. And it's just so hard. So,
in current events this week, just touch on one topic. What came out this week was a rumor, and I was curious what your thoughts are about this, that Zack Snyder was actually fired from the DC movie universe and Justice League specifically, where around May of last year it came out that he was taking a leave of absence to deal with a very tragic family matter, which was supposedly the reason he was left, and they brought in Joss Whedon to finish Justice League. And when it came out, it was kind of a muddled film that didn't quite have, you could tell it was two different voices, and it didn't do that well, and everybody at Warner Brothers looks like they're changing their tune. So my question is, like, do you think that was the right move by Warner Brothers to cut bait? Because there was supposedly he came back with this like horrendous first cut of a trailer. Do you think it was the right choice, or do you think they should have let him finish out and then pivot and work off of retconning it from there?
That's really hard. I mean, because when you brought it up, I had to look up the rumor, and I was surprised that actually was a rumor, because I remember, hearing about his daughter's suicide, and then just like, I have a daughter, my heart just like went out to the guy. I can't imagine. But like, just putting that all aside, once you have a director sign on, you go with them. For me, the Zack Snyder thing in a vacuum is he had so many movies to make his vision, like to show what his vision was. And I think once they kept going, getting less and less in quality, like I just rewatched Batman versus Superman because I had been really down on it. And then a few people were like, no, you have to give it another shot. It's really... And I watched it again, and it's convoluted. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It did well because, it's a superhero movie, but I don't know that you let somebody finish once they've gone wrong. I mean, it's very much like remember the Star Wars film? They had that Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were the ones that did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and 21 Jump Street. They fired them off the project and brought Ron Howard on to finish it. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, when you hire a director, you know what you're getting. Like, there's no way anybody at Warner Brothers didn't know what Zack Snyder was going to do with that movie. Just like there's no way they didn't know what was going to happen with a solo movie when you put the 21 Jump Street guys involved. You're going to get their style. That's an established thing. And to pull somebody off, I mean, it just feels like you're trying to chase a trend.
I agree. I don't think they should have pulled him, just because I agree with you. You already knew what you're getting with him, and you let him direct two big movies already, and then you sign him on to do the third, so why don't you just finish it? Because by the end of the time the movie came out, it wasn't good I'm going to put an asterisk next to it. It wasn't good anyway by the time it came out, because you had two different voices on it, and it wasn't a complete vision. So you have it was a muddled mess almost. The asterisk on that is I still actually liked Justice League, and also I liked Batman vs Superman, and I was not as much of a fan of Man of Steel, but within the universe I accept it.
I don't like Superman as a character. I think he's way too powerful, and I think the only time you get something interesting happen is when you take away his powers. Like, you can't do anything but take away his powers and then make him, like, deal with the fact that now his power is gone. Even when you're talking in Batman versus Superman, the change doesn't come until after he's, like, Batman has figured out how to do the kryptonite gas, and then he gets to actually fight Superman. He's about to kill him, and then, oh, thank goodness their mothers have the same name, because now they can be friends again. You know?
Yeah.
And it's just the whole thing. And then by the time you get to the end, you have that weird creature that Lex Luthor created, and they're fighting, and then you really realize how, like, useless Batman is, who's just kind of, like, hanging out as Gal Gadot and, you know, Henry Cavill just, like, take on the monster, and then, you know, what does Batman do? He just kind of cheers him on. It's just, to me, the philosophy that they're trying to do, that they're trying to set up, is like, okay, who gets to be the ultimate arbiter of what's good and what's bad? And, you know, you're essentially like one vigilante saying to another vigilante, hey, I don't trust you as a vigilante. But they did it so poorly, and it was so just half measured that I just didn't. I don't know. I never enjoyed that movie, and watching it again, I was just as confused. Like, literally, there's a scene where Batman is flying into Gotham, and he calls Alfred, and he's like, what's going on? And Alfred's like, how do I explain this? And I'm like, yep, that's pretty much the movie. I don't know how you explain this.
All right, well, first off, as the movies progress between going from Man of Steel to Batman to Justice League, I've progressively liked them more. And I was very disappointed with Man of Steel, like very, very disappointed, because when you saw the trailers, I was like, oh, I like this take. The trailer looked great. It was like, you're a little more visceral. Looks like you're going to take a little bit more personal stance and how you're going to show a superhero. And it looked like a different take on Superman as well. Once I started watching the movie from the get-go, it was like way over the top with like aliens, and he was on his planet, which his planet's fine, but like aliens and flying dragons and Matrix baby type vessels. And I was just like, this is bonkers.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then the rest of it was everything that they wanted to do and say, they said on the nose, which is one of my biggest problems that has happened throughout all the movies. Yes. Any kind of emotion or theory or what they're thinking or what themes are trying to present, they say them instead of actually allowing these characters like to go through these processes and struggles and figure them out. And they put them in the situations, but then instead of allowing them to kind of go through it, they just say what they're thinking or what they're feeling or that kind of stuff. And it kind of like totally undercuts what they're trying to do. But the thing is, though, what they're trying to say and what they're trying to do, I really appreciate it. And I think for me, the intentionality of what they're going for and their themes they were trying to chase and present and show with these characters, I really, really appreciated that. And it's something that none of the Marvel movies really have, minus maybe Guardians, which is the only really good Marvel movie, in my opinion, where all the Marvel movies, to me, don't have this deeper conflict that they're trying to overcome. That I just appreciate that, and I just feel like the bones of the movie are there. It's just the execution gets bogged down, and Zack Snyder is not great with the plot sequencing of a movie. He can make everything look real great. The tone of it, I think, is still fantastic. The feel of the movie is really good. I just think their execution and even some of their maybe actor choices weren't dead on. Eisenberg as Lex Luthor is just terrible. And talk about somebody who's just saying everything that is supposed to be thought or expressed through action and movement. I mean, it's just baffling. You don't get me wrong. But again, for me, all flaws aside, I still generally have a positive feeling about these movies. And I've grown to overlook all of their flaws. And it's such a weird thing. And I agree. When I first watched these movies, I'm just like, I don't know what the hell I'm watching. This is terrible. And I'm so disappointed. But I kept watching them, especially Batman vs. Superman. I just look past all of it, and I just enjoy the very main broad strokes of the movie that I just like it better. And then when you tie in a Wonder Woman movie that actually nails on everything of how everything should have been presented, it really gives me a bigger leeway to just enjoy it for what it is. It's a great movie, no, but does like what I want out of it, like the intentionality and the themes. Are they what I want? Yes. So I just roll with that and really give myself a large suspension of disbelief for these movies. I completely understand why most people don't. So I get it. But again, what I'm trying to get at is that I wish it was completely finished through with Zack Snyder's actual envision of the Justice League movie, because it feels like there was a lot of strings set up in the first two movies, especially Batman vs. Superman, for the Justice League movie that were never finished. And now I'm just like, okay. That's my biggest disappointment. There was a lot of open-ended stories and story strings that he set up, plot points that were never finished, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. I like the fact that your defense of Batman versus Superman or any of the DC movies is, well, I've learned that they're going to be awful, so I'm overlooking everything that's awful just to kind of get to the root of it. So
I know.
I really appreciate that. And, I mean, really to put a nod to Wonder Woman, because it really did do it right, where you really saw the conflict in them without them having to like go into their philosophy on the nose. I mean, when you had the scene in the trench where they're going to save the town, like that was the whole two philosophies of everybody, and that was great. To take it out to your bigger point, I think that I agree they should have let him finish if that was what needed to happen, because you knew what you were getting, and if you wanted to make a change, it's better to make it in the next movie and let the Justice League be what it was. And you could have rebooted tonally without having to reboot cast wise, which would have been an interesting thing to do. So you're gonna start rebooting tonally anyway, and I think because it was handled so haphazardly, for whatever reason, I think that's probably why DC looks like they're probably just going to focus on doing standalone movies and abandon the thing that Marvel has done so well, which is keep everything going into this giant collective universe and then have it go in and out or whatever.
I think they're still going to make them within the same universe, but I don't think they're going to have to make them as interconnected as they are trying to do, like the Marvel movies did, where they always bring in some other character and then set up some storyline for the next movie that's coming along. Right. They are just going to make like an Aquaman movie, like they did the Wonder Woman movie. They made a great Wonder Woman movie that can stand in of its own, but you can then they found a way to tie her back into the full universe. But if you never see any other movies, you're fine seeing Wonder Woman and being the end of it. I think they'll team up again at some point, but I think the major focus is allow each one to have their own creative input through a director, writer, producer team for each film. But I think they could have just let Justice League finish out what they wanted to do and then make that pivot. The same way Marvel's making pivots now, and they're finishing up, they do their different eras and then they switch and they're going to do all that. I think he still could have done that and kept the cast, but like you said, just kind of switch tone a bit. And I think it would have been fine. And
I had heard that one of the biggest problems was that the action sequences were not what Warner Brother wanted, and I think that would take away a lot from everything. Yeah. And I mean, you know how this goes. There's so many people who are making decisions on this, and so many cooks in the kitchen that unless you trust somebody 100%, it's going to be really hard. You know? That
was my problem with this Joss Whedon thing coming in, is it felt like almost like a standard paint by color Marvel movie, though, as far as the story then goes, and not have to just like, all right, here we go, another bad guy and a giant portal and some weird boxes. Yeah. So that is where I got frustrated. And my biggest frustration, though, was just the Superman storyline, I think, got cut up, where Superman, we're missing him now, and it's like, come on, man, earn it more. We've kind of said our piece about it. So yeah. I would have liked to seen the Vision come out, just because there was a lot of things set up that I thought maybe they would have had some more finality to it if he was able to finish it. Will we ever see that version? Probably not. Would I love to see it? Absolutely. So we can only hope and pray. Let's move on then to our main topic of the week. So let's talk a little bit Super Bowl commercials and why they kind of are feeling a little less fun and eventful than they used to be. Probably maybe even like 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Definitely like in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were peak of like half the reason people tuned into the Super Bowl was to see the commercials, where now I don't feel that buzz as much anymore. I mean, you and me both had the team to watch, so we were a little less in tuned to the commercials this year, and I had to go back and watch them actually because I was at a bar and I wasn't able to focus as much on them. But I heard some of the talk about it, but even the talk about it seems like it's a little less grandiose and excited about it. And even though they're still ranking the 10 best, they still don't seem to have that lasting memory. There's not even one or two really that stand out that we're like, yeah, we're going to remember that for a while. First, your general take on the Super Bowl commercials. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you think it's a problem? What are your thoughts?
I 110% agree. I think that the Super Bowl ad quality has been going down for the last couple of years. I just don't think that they're doing... The Super Bowl always had like one or two, for me, like super memorable ads that just really, like, they hit, and then people are talking about them the next day and everything. And this year just didn't seem to have that. There was very few that even after the game, a lot of people were talking about, and we were just like, wait, okay, so what ads were there? A lot of people were really much more excited about the movie trailer previews that were going on during the Super Bowl than anything else. I think the other thing was, I don't understand advertisers leaning into this dramatic mood of like wanting to do something. Like Budweiser did it this year, and Stella, and even Dodge did one where they're handing out like relief to flood victims and stuff. They strike this like super, super serious tone, as if you're not watching a movie where guys are running 100 miles an hour at each other and everybody's drinking. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, and it does not seem the type of place to put like a super dramatic ad. And year after year, every time they do this, the comedy ones always rank the highest. Like, people want to laugh. You're in a joyful mood. Like, even the Toyota one, which was a skier, and it starts with her, the odds of her getting to the Olympics or winning a gold medal because she was born with no legs. And it just gets like less and less odds until it gets to the end, and then she wins the gold medal, and it's like Toyota. And I'm like, first of all, I mean, good for her, great, competition. I can see somebody making that pitch, but at the same time, I'm like, getting a Toyota is not going to make me feel like I won a gold medal. Second of all, I got kind of offended that we were usurping her struggle to get to that level with just being like, oh yeah, and get a Toyota. And you had even brought up about the Martin Luther King one, which was just horrific.
That was amazing to me because I came across the article on Vox, and that showed that the Dodge commercial, they do, like you said, they're doing this whole hurricane relief aspect to their story, trying to say that everybody should come together and be neighbors, and this is what America's about, and showing all these people doing these things, helping out other people who were in bad places with like natural disasters. And you'd see a couple shots here or there, of course, of a Dodge truck, and that's what's driving all these people around. Mm-hmm. But over the whole thing, they have this monologue, this speech from Martin Luther King Jr. About like community and coming together and all this and that. Well, it turns out that actually the speech is longer, and that's just a small excerpt from it. Like 2 paragraphs down from where they pulled that speech from, he actually goes in and talks about the manipulation of the advertising industry and how they're trying to make you feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses. And he specifically calls out car commercials, making you want a car to show off like, this is me. Yeah. And here's actually part of that the speech where he talks about this. Like, he literally calls out car commercials in the same speech that they use to sell a car. Yeah. And it's just an appropriation of somebody's presence and their ideology and what they stand for in a completely bastardized way, and just the complete opposite of what the intention was of some person's speech or movement or what they're trying to help general society with. And it was so tone deaf. It was astounding.
I remember we were all watching it, and as it was going halfway through, like, the room was getting quieter and quieter because people were really trying to figure out what they were advertising with this. And then when it was like Dodge, like everybody was laughing. That this was it was so ridiculous. There was nothing you could do but laugh about it. All Apologies by Nirvana used in the T-Mobile ad that was like, oh, if you're tired of racial inequality, have T-Mobile, which was just insane to me. It's the one with all the babies and they're playing All Apologies as the lullaby, and it's just like, we're all equal like T-Mobile. And that was another one that just got me. I was just like, what are you talking about?
I forgot about that one. And I actually remember seeing that one as it aired. I was just like, this is stupid. But again, that message is a bad message, where using Nirvana's music for that, though, you're not appropriating Nirvana in a negative way, in the sense that you know what I mean? Like, Nirvana made a song, whatever it's about, but it doesn't have a high standing in society, in the sense that, like, Martin Luther King stood for like equality and civil rights and things like that, which are greater issues than whatever Nirvana was singing about, in the sense that Nirvana is a rock band, Led Zeppelin's a rock band, Rolling Stone's a rock band, Run DMC, they were a hip hop group. So when you're using that, they're already a commercial group. Like, they're already selling their songs to make a profit, and if they decide to use it in a different medium to make more profit, great. Martin Luther King's speech is actually trying to help stop oppression of people, and trying to open their minds and of even the oppressed. Like, that's what that speech is too, is just that group that is oppressed, and trying to open up their eyes to how they're trying to be manipulated and things like that, which is why I think it's a different category of appropriating something. And that's why, to me, it's more wrong than T-Mobile using Nirvana song. That's almost just in poor taste. Them with the babies and all that, it's just weird. Where the Dodge commercial was just like completely tone deaf and misusing something to something that was helping, is there for a bigger movement, and you're just still trying to sell cars. Are you trying to sell cell phones, T-Mobile? Sure. But again, that is just a bad commercial. I just think there's a difference between the two.
And I agree with you. I think that when you take a movement, the movement for equality, and the whole segregation, and you're trying to just turn that around, some 50 years later, 60 years later, and be like, okay, well, we're gonna use that to sell cars, is crazy to me.
Yeah, I see some Apple commercials, and they do this too. The message there is about, say the Maya Angelou one, is about people all being the same. They may look different, but we're all one person in the end. And that's what this poem that they used was about. In the end, are you still trying to sell commercials and put Apple in a brand that does that? Absolutely. But I feel different about that use of it, because they still try to keep it within the context of what the intention of said piece of art was created for when they make this said commercial. Because you could take that commercial out and you would never even know it. Like, if you didn't put the Apple logo on the end of it, because that's all there is. They don't actually even show the product.
Right.
You wouldn't even know it, and you could just be like, oh, that's like this really cool moving, somebody made this cool video to Maya Angelou's poem. And then I went out and searched the Maya Angelou poem, and actually her recorded, because it's her voice they're using. Right. Maybe a little more awareness of said poet and what she's all about, and what she's trying to come across with her poetry. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's a different way of use that is at least a little bit more appropriate, at least when they're using a piece of somebody's art to sell a product that doesn't feel as dirty, where this Dodge thing is just a complete dumpster fire, in my opinion.
I agree. And there was a lot of commercials that I felt like got into this really weird thing of almost like, well, we're a great company, and because we're good people, you should buy our product. And like I said, with the Budweiser thing, with the canned like water, and the Stella thing of like buy a chalice to get water. Yeah. The Hyundai one, where they were, for every Hyundai they would donate to cancer research. I mean, I don't know why you're trying to guilt me into buying your car, but I'm not gonna be like, well, like, if I want to donate to cancer research, I'll donate to cancer research. I'm not buying your car because you're going to promise to give money. And the flip side of it is, why don't you just give money anyway? And then the thing that gets even worse is like, wait a minute, why are you just doing all this stuff for publicity? If you weren't going to make a commercial about it, were you not going to hand out that water, Budweiser? Like, if you were not going to donate to cancer research, are you really not going to hand out that car? Like,
Yeah.
That to me is just the balls on that, to be like, it cheapens anything you're doing as any sort of philanthropy, to be like, well, yeah, you're doing it to sell a product. And that's...
Yeah. You're doing something to call it out that you're doing something good, to then make people feel like, well, I'll buy your car then, or I'll buy your beer, or whatever. Maybe.
Yeah. Face full of nachos, and then it's like there's people who are suffering in the world, and it's like, yeah, I know, but...
We're watching something for entertainment, and then you guys try to guilt trip us into talking about sad things, but then using that guilt trip into trying to sell your product.
Yeah.
And it's scummy. And they've done it for a long time. This isn't the first Super Bowl. This happens almost every Super Bowl where they do this. They tie you buying or using their product to actually doing something good. That's that. There's plenty of that happening in the Super Bowl. Always happens in the Super Bowl. But then let's talk about a little bit more other aspects of it. It's not just the ridiculous guilt trips that companies try to do. It's also, I want to talk a little bit about these nostalgia trips, which is also a much bigger topic in all of media, be it movies or TVs, but the nostalgia trips, and again, they've been doing this for a couple years now, but one of the first ones I remember was the Doritos commercial with Peter Dinklage and Morgan Freeman both doing the rap battle to Busta Rhymes and Missy Elliott, two big 90s rappers. And it seems like the 2010s we have a lot of the 80s nostalgia going on, but we're starting to get towards the end of the decade, and now you're starting to see some drips and drabs of the 90s nostalgia coming now. So I feel like that's going to be the next wave, but it's just small things here and there. But this is one of those 90s nostalgia popping up. Busta Rhymes versus Missy Elliott. And well, the commercial was generally fine. It was funny. I actually thought he did really good with the lip syncing, and it worked for Peter Dinklage. I did not like the Morgan Freeman part of it. I think Morgan Freeman is a overused aspect. To me, he's the William Shatner now of pitchmen for products. And it's like, all the good things about Morgan Freeman with his monotone, godlike voice that can make anything sound fantastic. It's just, I get it. It's Morgan Freeman. He's old. And it's that Betty White thing of like, it's an old person being thrown into against typecast of doing this young person thing. And it's just like, yeah, I've seen this before. I've seen a lot of Morgan Freeman. So it's a twofold on the Doritos commercial. I think they're jumping on this nostalgia bandwagon and also doing this juxtaposition thing of an old person doing a young person thing. That Doritos commercial was such a mess for me because, first of all, I didn't get why we have Peter Dinklage and Morgan Freeman rapping against each other, because it's not like Busta or Missy Elliott are dead. So we're doing some sort of weird lip sync battle, which, I mean, great, they're lip syncing, and I guess to me it was like, hey, we need to do nostalgia, but also like, what's hot now? It's like, well, Game of Thrones is hot, and so is lip sync battles, and so is like Morgan Freeman. He's always, let's just put them all together in one commercial and we'll do it, and it'll be awesome. And everybody's just like, yay! And they're like, what do you do? It was such a mess. It was such a mess of so many different ideas and so many people. You could hear the brainstorming. You could be in that conference room where everybody's just like, so what's cool now? And everybody's calling out 50 ideas, and they're all just like, yeah, let's just use them all. They all sound great. Let's just put it all into one ad. They tied two products under probably whatever, Frito-Lay or Pepsi Cola. I don't even know what they ever are. They didn't do just Doritos and then a separate Mountain Dew. They tied them into one. Yeah. It is just a mismatch of just craziness. It's terrible.
It felt like maybe at the end what they wanted to do is have Logan Paul run in and dab, but because he was like hot, they just like chopped the end of that commercial off. It's just, it's terrible. No, but
yeah, I agree. What about because the other nostalgia trips, whereas the Kia commercial with Steven Tyler, and then they did this weird Uncanny Valley representation of young Steven Tyler, which in my opinion did not look like young Steven Tyler. No. I thought that was weird. And so what about a Kia?
I mean, that was a little bit better to me because I get the idea of them, like him going back in time and like reliving. To me, that was also weird just because a Kia is not the one that makes me think of youth.
Kia does not make me think of anything that they ever want me to think about Kia. They either want me to think, they start getting into like higher price luxury cars. Yeah. They try to start getting me into thinking that they're a quality made car.
Right.
They try to start making you think they're a youth oriented car and whatever. And then they try to do like they're a family car. It's like, I don't think about Kia when I think of any of those things. You are not on my top 5 list for any of those categories. And yet they still keep trying to pump out these different ideas. And you're just like, nope.
The only nostalgia thing that worked for me in the entire Super Bowl, including the Prince thing at halftime. But the only nostalgia thing that really worked for me was the Eli Manning Beckham Dirty Dancing commercial.
Yeah.
Okay, now hear me out. I think that was enough of a moment where they were able to take the ban out of excessive celebration this year that does seem kind of contemporary. And both of those guys are, I mean, Eli Manning's kind of nerdy. It felt like that all worked. Dirty Dancing, everybody knows that lift. That to me was the only sort of nostalgia-ish thing that worked for me.
I felt it was a little forced. Also, it was an NFL commercial advertising during an NFL game and the biggest game of the year. We already know we're watching the NFL. The reason NFL had to make an NFL commercial is beyond me. What in the hell? And it had nothing to do with anything. And I just felt it was all forced. And it's like, let's put two guys in. It's the same thing as the Doritos. What would be funnier to put Eli Manning and Odell Beckham in? How about Dirty Dancing? It's like I could see them. I see him going through like 50 ideas. Like, well, wouldn't it be funny if he did the flash dance thing, or if they did what if they did Harry Met Sally, and they're all, like, they just went down a list of like movie moments that would juxtapose against Eli Manning and Odell Beckham Jr. And it's like, get out of here.
But okay,
so
to me it worked, and then to me it was also a bigger FU because I think it ended up being one of everybody's favorite commercials from the Super Bowl. And it was an NFL commercial. Watch the NFL.
The only one I kind of liked, and although I still am just like, it wasn't great. It was just, I guess we're talking the best of a bunch, was I thought the Jeff Goldblum in the Jeep running from T-Rex was kind of funny. And look, and it was everything that I don't generally like. But I'm just saying, if we are kind of saying, is there any of them like, I thought it was like okay. But again, it was the nostalgia part, and it was just like, it's just such an obvious pull. And that's why I have a problem with all these nostalgia bits. It's like so obvious of trying to just pull out these like emotions from people, and it's like the lowest hanging fruit of a way to do it in my eyes. And it seems like everybody watched that Mad Men episode with Don Draper, and where he's clicking through the Kodak thing talking about nostalgia, and every ad exec wants to be Don Draper, and just like nostalgia. That's what we need to do. And it's just like, man, you guys are so behind. I think this whole nostalgia thing, again, larger topic, has been driven into the ground so much, just like Morgan Freeman being a pitch man for everything. It's lost its luster of like, haha, yeah, remember that? That's kind of cool. So that's just me.
I agree with you, and I think it actually ends up being a much bigger thing because when you have things like Fuller House being rebooted and Will and Grace being rebooted, and then I don't know if you just saw today, YouTube Red.
Cobra Kai.
Red is doing Cobra Kai, where it's going to be like rebooting the Karate Kid as a YouTube series, and it's beginning to feel so lazy to just draw from the past and put a shine on it and then throw it out there for everybody to consume, that I think this year, when you did have the nostalgia in the commercials, it was just like you could feel people audibly groan. It was just like, oh God, this again.
Again, I think we'll actually have this as a main topic in a future episode. It's just the nostalgia train that's running pretty fast right now, but it could possibly start to run out of steam, so we'll see. Other commercials that aren't as much nostalgia, just talking about other weather commercials overall. I'd say my favorite one of them all, again, low bar I feel like, but I think the best of the bunch, I wouldn't necessarily favorite, was the Tide commercials with David Harbour. The guy from Stranger Things. I thought was, at least, I'm actually not a big person on meta, but sometimes with like the craziness of whatever you're doing, sometimes the best route is just to call it on its face. Just like we're trying to do with this podcast. We're just two guys that have some opinions that thought, well, let's record it on a machine. We're not Einstein over here talking about this stuff, but hey, why not? But I just thought at least they called it on its face, and they almost, it was clever in the sense that now everything that you are watching, you're like, but it's a Tide commercial. And the best part of it was the kicker of the, probably in the same Unilever brand or Procter & Gamble brand, whatever it was, the Old Spice guy. I thought that was clever because I was watching it and I thought it moved on. I really did thought it moved on. And then it came out with the Tide thing and he's on the horse. Like, I just thought, all right, it's cheeky, but it's clever. And it's like, I laughed at it and it was not nostalgia. Like they worked for the laughs in a simple but effective way, and it was just clever.
I would agree. I thought they did a great job with those Tide ads, and the thing that I think goes to prove what we've both been talking about so much is that so you had to shoot those commercials so far ahead of time in order to like do this and then make it seem like it would fit in with what was happening in the landscape of the Super Bowl ads. So if people weren't doing the weird nostalgia stuff, if you wouldn't believe that Old Spice would bring back the guy on the horse, like if you didn't believe that Lincoln was going to do their old ad again, none of those ads would have worked. You would have seen it coming a mile away. And because everybody is so uninspired now, or the ads are uninspired now, that it just feels like it would come through, and then it would be like, is this a Tide ad? Is this going to be a Tide ad? And then, of course it did get a little silly, because then when you get to the more heavy ads, like it would be like, ooh, is this going to be a Tide ad?
Yeah. So it was clever though, and like you said, but again, it was fun and light, and it wasn't over dramatic. Like they just hit on a lot of like what I'd want out of a Super Bowl ad, just fun and easy. So they did a good job with that. Moving on, some other ones I thought maybe in the same category where I was a little confused, but it may be smart, was the Crocodile Dundee Australia ad with Danny McBride and
Chris Hemsworth.
So did you like that or did you not like that?
I didn't like that ad, and the reason is something that I believe we have talked about before, which is that they released everything on YouTube beforehand. So the joke was already done. Like, you knew it wasn't a Crocodile Dundee movie. Like, from the minute he popped on screen, you're like, oh, it's that Australia thing. It's odd to me that these companies are going to spend $5 million for 30 seconds to put their ad on the Super Bowl when you've already released it on a free platform. And I get that YouTube did this whole thing this year where they had a playlist where you could play the Super Bowl ads, and that got a lot of plays. And I get that people are trying to get views, and saying something is going to be a Super Bowl ad gets you views ahead of time, and then when it's on during the Super Bowl is just to fulfill your promise that this is a Super Bowl ad. But to me, it didn't work because the joke was over. Like, I already got the joke. And the funniest part was the first time seeing it and not knowing the joke, to be like, oh, that's funny that Danny McBride would be the new Crocodile Dundee. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess he's not.
So I agree, and great segue, because that was I actually wanted to touch on this, which is part of the reason why I think ads are having trouble in the Super Bowl now, is because they're now getting posted online ahead of the Super Bowl. So you're losing the wow factor and the novelty of the ad, which was part of why you tuned in, was to see this ad for the first time, because you knew they were going to try hard to be creative.
Yeah.
But when it's already out there, and anybody who's under like 40 knows to just go check it out and they can see them. It's like, I'm not surprised now. Now I don't remember it because it's like, well, I already saw it. And when you see, and it's funny how in the different mediums, when you watch it, the impact it has. Like when you watch it on a Super Bowl day, on a TV, around people, and everybody's watching it at the same time, it has a bigger effective measure versus on YouTube alone on a smaller screen, and you're just kind of clicking through doing other things. Your attention isn't 100% to it, that it doesn't have the same gravity to it. And that's why, because it was just on the Super Bowl, it gave it an elevated sense of self, which was great. And now I think now it's losing part of that, and that's why they may have been average before, and they maybe all the quality isn't down. It's just that when you watch them, just the fact that it was a Super Bowl, considered a Super Bowl commercial, made it feel like it was that much more important, or that much better, or that much more connective to it, just because you're doing it with everybody else. And now watching on YouTube, it doesn't have that effect.
I agree 100%. I think you nailed it. I think that is exactly right. I think when you're watching it by yourself, you play it and then you immediately are like, is this worth sharing? Nah. Okay, I'm going to go on to something else. And even if you do like share it, or you see it on your Facebook feed, you're just like, oh, okay, that was kind of funny. But when you see good ads on the Super Bowl, I remember what would normally happen is the game would be playing, and then as they were going to commercial, people would call out like commercial. Everybody would rush in, like it would be dead silent, and people would be like watching. If anybody was talking, they'd be like, hey, shh, commercials are on. Everybody's watching, and if there was a good commercial that hit, like people talked about it. Like they talked about it during the game, they talked about it during the commercials. And this time, it just didn't happen. The only one that they did it with were the Tide ads. And a couple times people were like, oh, that was funny, like blah, 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 blah. And then it became like kind of a running joke. Nobody was really like discussing the ads. And that's been happening less and less over the years that we've been watching. And then the only one that actually made everybody kind of quiet down, it was a Honda ad. It was this, they were doing some sort of contest. I don't even know what it is. And because it was so dumb, I don't even want to look it up. But basically, the guy stood there in silence for about 30 seconds while this scene was playing out behind him, this street scene. The effective thing was essentially 30 seconds of silence, of just somebody staring, and that made people be like, what's going on here? What are we watching?
What we're talking about is the effectiveness seems to have waned when you post things on YouTube ahead of time, and now you don't have that first time, the novelty factor of watching it with these people. And I think this proves that rule, and which was one of the more talked about ads of the evening, and I thought was actually very clever. It's the first time it's been done, and now we'll see how much this gets copycatted. Was the Netflix ad for Cloverfield. So what they did was Netflix. So you started seeing this ad for Cloverfield. This is one of those J.J. Abrams production company movies that they always give a secret title to, and it's kind of buzzed about because they do a good job of keeping it under wraps. And it had this pseudonym of God Particle or something, but everybody kind of figured it was the next Cloverfield movie, and nobody knew when it was coming out. It was supposed to come out this year, and then all of a sudden you see this ad for it. You're like, oh wow, okay, oh, and then you find out, oh, it's called Cloverfield. You're like, oh wow, oh shit, there it is. That's the new one. I didn't know they were going to advertise for it. But then the kicker was that then they said coming soon, and you're like, oh wow. And then they showed that, I think in the first half, they showed that one, and then they showed it again in the second half, except that it popped up coming after the Super Bowl, and then you saw the Netflix logo pop up. So not only did Netflix have it, and nobody knew that Netflix bought the rights to it and was going to air it, they were able to drop it right after the Super Bowl, which I just thought was so clever because it's just the immediacy of it, and nobody knew about it. This was super secret commercial. Nobody knew about it, and the fact they kept it under wraps that Netflix bought the rights to the movie, and they were going to air it, and then they were able to drop it, they said, right after the Super Bowl. So usually it's like the network that's airing the Super Bowl has they put in some prime slot right after the Super Bowl for some big show they want to show off. But Netflix, in a sense, usurped that a bit by saying, hey, we're going to drop this because they can do that. That's the way their business model works. They're able to just drop it. It's kind of like when Beyonce dropped her album randomly on iTunes, like what was it, 2 years ago? Like it had the same effect of like talking about it, except you had this platform of 100 million people saw this ad and they go, hey, right after the Super Bowl, let's go check out that movie. I thought it was really smart.
Yeah, that was really, really good because that was such a coup to be able to take whatever that NBC show was going to be and just like undercut it and be like, yeah, but if you want to watch the Cloverfield Paradox, just turn it on right after the Super Bowl. And I would be interested to see how many people flipped over and immediately started watching it because that was great to be like coming soon. Everybody's like, oh, that looks cool. Like, and then it made people start talking about 10 Cloverfield Lane and everything like that.
Yep.
And then at the end it was like, oh wait, it's available right after the Super Bowl. I agree. That was a good one, and that was a good coup for them.
And I just think that was a clever way to promote that movie because from everything you hear, the movie's actually not really good, but it doesn't matter, though, because it's the way in which they dropped it. And the secrecy that has always been surrounded by these Cloverfield movies. Like it's just part of the buzz that they're able to do with these movies, these J.J. Abrams movies. It's just part of the lure.
Right.
And to be able then to drop it, and it's not like, oh, it's coming to theaters in March. No, it's coming after the Super Bowl. And you just heard about it on the Super Bowl. The way these distribution models are evolving and how the digital model is, and that is just a great way to do something new. Can you get that novelty factor all the time? No, because you can really do it once. And
sure. I
think you'll see some bandwagon hoppers trying to do something similar. But hey, to me, that's just pushing it forward. They tried something new. I thought it was smart. Will it wear old fast? Sure. And I just thought it was a good idea. And anytime it's new like that, I applaud that.
Oh, I agree. I think that was great, and I'm sure you will. I'm sure that's going to be a thing, and it's going to be, I will bet you next year it's going to be Hulu's going to have one, and Amazon Prime's going to have one and everything, because Netflix had the foresight to be like, hey, we can drop this. That's going to undercut everything, and we get all these people that are just going to flip over, because some people are watching the Super Bowl just to be in the know, and they don't really care. Like, if you weren't a Philadelphia fan or you weren't a Patriots fan, this game didn't really matter all that much to you. Half the people who watch the game are just...
Half of them, at least, are casual fans that they look for the commercials, and then you're there just for the entertainment spectacle of it, not as much the game itself. All right, well, I think we've talked about it. I think the big crux of the problem, again, is the releasing early. So hopefully they start figuring out and they start holding them back again. And I think overall just need to rethink their creativity. But again, I think we've had a couple years of the same type of commercials. So hopefully like the Netflix thing is something new. So hopefully we'll start seeing some new different models of ways to promote their products. Then that'll probably go through its age of copycats and a couple years of the same thing. And then we'll go over again. So hopefully they'll get back some gusto in here.
I had looked this up, and I am a huge fan of trivia and just all that stupid knowledge that gets stuck in your head just to bring out and impress people at parties. Do you know what the first ad was? The first Super Bowl ad to stream on YouTube first was?
Was it the Volkswagen Darth Vader?
It was the Volkswagen Darth Vader. Nicely done. Yeah, it was 2011. They released it early. It was a viral hit before it even hit on the Super Bowl, and that started this whole trend. I was completely flabbergasted. I wanted to look it up. I wanted to make sure that I knew what it was. But yeah.
No, and I remember there was a great ad too. And I remember that's why I got so much buzz. And then before even the Super Bowl started. But again, then it served its purpose at that moment in time. It was new. Nobody ever done it before. Yes. So they got that initial viral reaction out of it. But I do think at the commercial itself, you're like, okay, I already saw this. But I remember you're talking about it again because they did this for the first time, aired it previously. Yeah. The shine of that strategy has worn off a lot. And I think it's actually taking away, like we said, even more now from the Super Bowl commercials themselves than any buzz you get about it before the show airs. And they're not even doing the pre-roll commercials as much anymore, where they try to do a few teases to a Super Bowl ad. It's almost just like, here's our ad, and that's it. And
yeah.
I would like to see some more of the teases come back, get excited for their Super Bowl ad once it airs.
I completely agree. I would really like it to go back to just dropping your ad on the Super Bowl and then have it be available on YouTube right after, because it's going to get passed around. People are going to be like, did you see this ad? And then it'll be in the next day and whatever. Like, I just don't think you have, as an engaged watcher, like you were saying before, you just, like, I don't care. Agree. I'm watching it.
Just stop showing them beforehand. Give us the novelty and the surprise of Super Bowl day of commercials. All right, well, that was a good divulging into the problems of Super Bowl commercials, and I think we solved the world's problems today. So let's wrap this up. Is there anything that you would like to spotlight? Just anything kind of cool, anything you found this week, or that you just want to kind of talk about real quick?
I do. With the Eagles winning the Super Bowl and everything, John Darrenbaugh's movie, so he's the long snapper for the Philadelphia Eagles, who also is starting, now that he's retired, is going to be a magician and everything. Like, he was on America's Got Talent. They are going to do a biopic about his life. And with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, they've fast-tracked that because he's writing his story. Mike Tomlin, the producer, is trying to produce the movie, not the coach.
He's a Philadelphia guy.
Not to be confused with the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is also Mike Tomlin.
The producer, writer, showrunner, Mike Tomlin.
Right. He has the rights to John Darrenbaugh's story, and they are fast-tracking that so they can catch on to this whole buzz with the Philadelphia and the Super Bowl win, which I just think is awesome. I don't know how much you know about his story, but he had a really rough childhood. He took to magic to deal with everything, and then becomes this long snapper, has the long career, gets traded to New Orleans, and then finds out he essentially has a heart aneurysm, the same thing that killed Alan Thicke and John Ritter, and has to retire. Just straight has to stop playing football. One day you're there and the next day you're not. So anyway, they're doing his whole story, but that's now all getting fast-tracked because the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So it's great to have a championship in Philadelphia finally, and we get to have this story. It's
a really good story and quite an ending there, so it actually could be a very fun movie to watch.
Who do you think they should get to play him?
I honestly don't know, because I know he's just a kind of your regular average kind of Midwest looking guy. He's pretty obviously bulky football player kind of physique, so I don't know. Do you have anybody in mind?
I actually had two people in mind. I either think you should get the Mountain from Game of Thrones to play him, because facially they look similar.
I agree.
The other thing is I would think Chris Pratt would do a good job of playing somebody who has that determination and then also has the likability, because if you've ever seen his magic, he's a very likable guy. He's got great stage presence. I think Chris Pratt would do a really good job being that type of character.
I agree. Chris Pratt's Michelob Ultra commercial was actually one of the funnier commercials in the Super Bowl, by the way.
A pretty good one.
So he does. He's got that charisma that could actually make that a fun movie. So hopefully we'll be seeing that movie pretty soon. My spotlight of the week is Peter Gabriel, specifically his song Heroes.
Okay.
So I've been listening to this week, and I've listened to Peter Gabriel before, so I did that. But anyway, the reason what happened was I was watching The Americans, and towards the end of the episode, they're doing like a montage thing, and they had Peter Gabriel playing. I'm like, I know this. Who is this? And I couldn't think about it. Shazammed it, and it was Peter Gabriel. I was like, I knew it was Peter. I was like, I knew it. Okay, it's like, oh, very cool. And so I was just like, let me check him out on Spotify, and I typed him in. He actually, his catalog's not on Spotify, but he has like 3 or 4 songs on there that are on different albums, I think. And this one song, Heroes, is on like the Stranger Things soundtrack or something, so that's why it's on there. But I just remember, like, Peter Gabriel is just really good. He's such a unique voice, and he's got really great musical accompaniment to a lot of his songs. And so that was just one of those things. If you're looking for something different to listen to, it's just usually a lot of good, easy, uplifting songs. And specifically, Heroes is just really good. And I never knew it was his song because, tying this all back around with some of the topics today, the Justice League movie song, their marketing song is Heroes, but it's a cover by this Gangs of Youth band, they're called, which is a good song, and I like the riff, and it fit in with the movie and all that, but I did not know it was actually a cover of Peter Gabriel's song, and actually I like the Peter Gabriel version even better, so I've been kind of listening to that a lot this week, so I just thought I'd shine some light onto Peter Gabriel and specifically his song Heroes.
Oh, for sure. I would co-sign that 100%. I think Peter Gabriel, his whole musical career is so interesting. Like, if you listen back through his discography, he's got so many different sounds, and he has so many different like ways of just percussion and like, I don't know.
He experimented a lot, but everything was really good and interesting in what he does, and he's tried so many different ways. There's always a style of his that I think anybody could probably find something of his that they would like.
Agreed.
So so if you're looking for something new to listen to, check out Peter Gabriel. That was my spotlight of the week. That will do it for us for our first episode of Entertaining the Idea. I hoped you guys liked it, and we're gonna try to keep making this a thing. Hopefully weekly or bi-weekly. We'll see how this goes. But thanks for taking the time, Tony, and I'll speak to you next time.
Okay.
Woo.